Whitesnake is 1987 all the way, and the band's mega hit Here I Go Again is perhaps the catchiest hard rock song of all time. Whitesnake has a complex history that stretches over 4 decades. Here are a few things you probably don't know about the band. Whitesnake wasn't exactly an overnight sensation. David Coverdale formed the band after leaving Deep Purple and launching a brief solo career, releasing 2 albums. He then formed a band he initially called David Coverdale's Whitesnake, which he quickly and wisely shortened to just Whitesnake. The band released its first album, Trouble, in 1978. Over the next few years, Whitesnake released 5 more albums to modest success in the UK and Europe, and a distinct lack of success in the United States. The band's sound was initially out of step with what was happening in rock music at the time. It was a very bluesy, rough 1970s sound that simply wasn't in vogue in a world where punk rock and new wave were dominating the rock charts. Coverdale, to his credit, understood this and worked to change the band's sound. He switched up the personnel in his band and began writing songs that leaned more into the heavy metal sound that was popular at the time. Thanks to this evolution, Whitesnake's 6th album, Slide It In, became their initial modest breakthrough in the US, 6 years after their formation. They mounted a massive tour and got a few singles on the charts, and the stage was set for the band to take a tremendous leap forward with their next project, which is exactly what happened.
Finally, after all these years, Americans have shown great taste.
Whitesnake doesn't seem like a band that would be mentioned in the same sentence as blues legend B.B. King. The differing musical styles, cultural backgrounds, and fashion sense would seem to prove that these were 2 completely opposite worlds that would never mix. But it's important to note that band founder David Coverdale came out of a blues-inspired 1970s rock tradition thanks to his time in Deep Purple. So it's not entirely crazy to learn that one of Whitesnake's signature hit songs was originally written with the intention of giving it to King to record. According to Coverdale, Whitesnake guitarist Bernie Marsden had interviewed King for a British magazine in 1978. At the end of the interview, King invited Marsden and Whitesnake to write a song for him, and the band was excited to do so. The song the band came up with was Fool for Loving You. If you think that sounds familiar, that's because it eventually appeared on Whitesnake's 1980 album, Ready and Willing. Though they were trying to write for King, the band realized they liked the song too much to give it away. This turned out to be a good move, as the song hit number 13 on the charts in 1980 and number 43 when it was re-recorded and re-released in 1989. If you're just looking at Whitesnake's release history, you'd think the band existed smoothly and without controversy at least until 1989, when the band took an 8-year break between albums. But the fact is that Whitesnake essentially broke up in 1982. There was a lot going on for the band that year, thanks in no small part to Coverdale's efforts to continue to evolve Whitesnake's sound. The band wasn't getting along, and while their albums had sold well in Europe and the UK, they hadn't managed a breakthrough in the all-important US market. Then, Coverdale's daughter Jessica contracted bacterial meningitis. The lead singer decided to put the band on hold while he went home to look after her. The band, however, saw it differently. Guitarist Bernie Marsden, drummer Ian Pace, and bassist Neil Murray say they thought Coverdale was acting like he was Whitesnake and treating them as employees, not co-equal members. So they walked out. That might have been fine with Coverdale. He hired new band members and shaped the band into the hair metal powerhouse he'd been dreaming of. Though Coverdale was a key driving force, another of the main influences over Whitesnake's change in style and sudden success after years of frustration was music titan David Geffen. According to Coverdale, it was Geffen who actually persuaded him to evolve the band's sound in pursuit of success. Coverdale took the advice to heart. He moved to America, realizing that if he wanted to conquer the market, he had to live there. Whitesnake signed to Geffen's label in 1982, released Slide It In 1984, and over the course of those first 2 Geffen albums, became a whole new band. As Coverdale later recalled in an interview with Louder, it worked astonishingly well. I sold embarrassingly large amounts of records in a 3 to 5 year period. After finally tasting chart success in the US with 1984's Slide It In, Whitesnake was poised for huge success. American radio had finally given them significant airplay. A world tour had cemented a fan base, and their US music label, Geffen, was very supportive of the band. David Coverdale hired a new guitarist, John Sykes, and the 2 began writing songs in 1985 while Coverdale, always reinventing the band, looked around for a new drummer and other personnel. Things were going very well. Coverdale had resurrected an old demo from his Deep Purple days. a song that would become their huge hit Still of the Night. And a song he'd originally written for Tina Turner, Is This Love, would also be a smash for the band. With the new lineup finally in place, the band headed into the studio, but the biggest album of Whitesnake's career almost didn't happen. Around this time, Coverdale came down with a severe sinus infection that prevented him from singing for a full 8 months as he recovered. The infection was so bad he was given 50-50 odds of ever singing again and needed surgery to recover. Even worse, guitarist Sykes attempted to push Coverdale out of the band and replace him with another singer. When Coverdale re-entered the studio, the music tracks had been recorded, but the band had been fired. For many casual fans, Here I Go Again is a catchy rock song about moving forward and pursuing relentless dreams. The song was a smash top 10 hit for Whitesnake in 1987, and the music video starring Tawny Kitaen is an iconic image of the late 1980s. But the truth about Here I Go Again is a lot darker. The song had originally appeared on Whitesnake's 1982 album Saints and Sinners, and David Coverdale wrote the song about his crumbling marriage to Julia Borkowski, who he'd married in 1974. The couple divorced in 1978, and it was a dark time for Coverdale as he found himself sleeping in a separate bed even after they'd just welcomed a daughter together. It was in this frame of mind that he wrote his most successful song. It makes sense if you pay attention to the lyrics, many of which are all about feeling lost and asking for strength and guidance while pushing forward. Once you hear it, you can never hear the song in the same way again. Here I Go Again is also, interestingly, a song that had to be recorded 3 times before it became a hit. After Saints and Sinners, Coverdale recorded it 2 more times for the band's 1987 self-titled album. Once the final version hit, though, it really hit. The image of Tawny Kitaen cavorting on top of 2 Jaguars in the music video for Whitesnake's Here I Go Again is one of the most iconic moments of the golden age of music video. But it was actually supposed to be another very famous face from the 1980s doing those impressive cartwheels. David Coverdale and Kitaen already knew each other when the music video was being planned, but Kitaen wasn't originally cast in the role. Instead, supermodel Claudia Schiffer was supposed to appear. At the time, Schiffer was red hot as the face of the iconic Guess Jeans advertising campaign. One evening, Coverdale and Kitaen were out to dinner when Coverdale received an urgent message from the label. Schiffer had been forced to drop out of the video. He took Kitaen with him to the meeting with the video's director, Marty Callner. The moment Callner saw Kitaen, he asked if she'd take Schiffer's place, and naturally, Kitaen said yes. Coverdale brought in Paula Abdul to work with Kitaen on her moves, but Abdul reportedly told him Tawny didn't need any help.
I did floor and I did the balance beam. So, dancing on 2 Jaguar hoods, it was snap.
That decision had real-life consequences for Coverdale and Kitaen, who married 2 years later and divorced less than 2 years after that. Rock and roll is a notoriously chaotic business, and Whitesnake epitomizes that. There are only 2 constants in the history of Whitesnake: lead singer David Coverdale and an almost entirely new lineup of musicians every few years. In 1982, for example, Coverdale fired most of the band and reformed it with a new direction. And in 1987, he did pretty much the same thing before the album Whitesnake was even released. By the time Coverdale recovered from his devastating sinus infection and was preparing to promote the self-titled album, he'd fired basically the whole band again after they tried to force him out. That meant he needed new musicians not just for the upcoming tour, but for the music videos tied to the album's singles. So, when you watch an iconic video like Here I Go Again, you're actually watching a lie. With the exception of Coverdale and guitarist Adrian Vandenberg, none of the band members in that video actually played on the track they're miming. If you're a musician seeking job security, stay away from Whitesnake. Over the course of 42 years, the band has had 40 members aside from David Coverdale, who has been the only member to appear on every single album. In fact, it's not uncommon to find a musician who toured with the band but never appeared on a recording, or the other way around.
I mean, I wish the guys well. I'm familiar with all of them.
This is because Coverdale has always been willing to change the band's sound and approach when he thinks it's necessary, which often requires fresh blood, and possibly because he's difficult to work with. According to Louder, the entire band revolted against Coverdale's leadership in 1982, resulting in a complete purge and a new lineup. What's really remarkable is how many top-notch musicians have had their Whitesnake moment. People like legendary drummer Cozy Powell have made their mark in the band, after all. But perhaps the most remarkable statistic is the fact that the band has had 12 lead guitarists in its time, including absolute legends Vivian Campbell, Steve Vai, and John Sykes. If you're going to rearrange the lineup of your band every few years, after all, you might as well hire Hall of Fame caliber musicians. You might think that by 1985, David Coverdale was pretty rich. At the age of 22 in 1973, he became the lead singer of one of the biggest bands in the world, Deep Purple. Then he launched a solo career and finally put together Whitesnake, a band that by that point had released 6 albums, toured the world, and enjoyed not inconsiderable success around the world. And yet, by the mid-1980s, Coverdale was nearly $3 million in debt by the time he was working on the album that would become 1987's Whitesnake. Coverdale blames poor advice from the band's management over the years, and was apparently so desperate to get away from one manager that in the early 1980s, he took on more debt in exchange for a contract release. It all worked out. Whitesnake's self-titled 1987 album was a massive hit. Although the album only made it to number 2 on the charts, it kept charting for months on the strength of hits like In the Still of the Night and Here I Go Again. The album sold more than 15 million copies around the world, and Coverdale went from being millions in debt to having millions in the bank. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite bands are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.